Hello, everybody, and welcome to Gene's Reviews from just a regular dude, where I do movie reviews, trailer reactions, I react to YouTube videos, and I review YouTube channels. And basically, I'll just do whatever the hell I want. Today, I'm doing one. It's religious leaders that are charged with horrific crimes, and it's from a channel called Mr. Davis. So let's check this one out. Get my headphones on here. Get situated. All reclined in my couch. And we'll do this right now.
We often look to our religious leaders for some kind of guidance. We believe they know something that we don't, or that they can tell us how we should live our lives in order to get where we all want to be.
I don't need no one to tell me
Whether
how to
that
live
be
my
the
life.
kingdom of heaven or reaching nirvana, we trust these leaders to be trustworthy, honest, and kind human beings. With that said, many are known to wear a mask and hide either their true intentions or their troubling past. Here are 3 religious leaders who were convicted with horrific crimes.
Wolf in sheep's clothing.
Lundgren was born on May 3, 1950. Growing up in Mississippi, his family was heavily religious. His mother and father, and him by extension, were part of the Reorganized Church of Latter-day Saints, RCLDS. As a young child, he was abused mercilessly by his father,
That's
and according to those
break
who were
off
his
from the
neighbors
Mormon
at the time,
religion.
his mother did nothing about it. On top of this, Lundgren was an outcast at school and didn't have many friends. Those who knew
But
him
just so everyone knows, it's not recognized by the Mormon religion.
at the time referred to him as a loner. This led Jeffrey to spend most of his free time with his father, who taught him how to hunt. By the time he was a teenager, Lundgren knew how to load, fire, and maintain his firearms. In later years, Jeffrey enrolled at Central Missouri State University and stayed at a house that was meant for youths, part of the RCLDS. While staying there, he befriended Alice Keeler and Keith Johnson. Alice and he were both abused as children, so they bonded quickly and soon began sleeping with each other. By 1970, they were married, and Lundgren had enrolled in the Navy. December 2nd, 1970, their first child was born. 4 years later, he was given an honorable discharge, and not long after, his second son was born. The small family settled in San Diego for some time, but due to financial hardship, they moved back to Missouri in 1979, where they would have a third child. It was around this time that Jeffrey became abusive towards Alice.
Figures.
Reports claim he said he was tired of his wife and his financial troubles. One hospital record shows that Alice was hospitalized over a ruptured spleen that was believed to have come from Jeffrey pushing her into a door handle. In 1980, they had a fourth child, and 7 years later, he was dismissed from the RCLDS. This left Jeffrey with little to no income.
So he'll start his own church.
It was around this time he began building his own following. The house he was staying in was very close to the Kirtland Temple in Ohio, and he would volunteer there multiple times a week, giving the history of the temple and teaching the concept of chiastic interpretation. The idea is slightly confusing, but here is my best explanation. The belief started in saying everything created by God was a mirror image of itself on one side. He took this belief and applied it to the scripture. If the sentence before and after another sentence is consistent or line up with each other with their meaning, then the sentence is true. If they don't line up, the sentence is false. He falsely claimed that this idea was his creation, but built the following nonetheless. In 1987, he was asked to move out of the house which the church owned, as they'd become suspicious of him and believed he'd stolen things from the church on many occasions. Jeffrey did as he was told, and he and his family moved to a small farmhouse east of Ohio State Route 306. Many of his followers at the time stayed in the house with him and his family. These included Kevin Curry, Richard Brand, Greg Winship, Sharon Bluntschli, Daniel Kraft, and Debbie Olivares. It was at this time he began taking control of everyone and became the leader of his own homegrown cult. He had very strict rules in place, including one that forbids those staying in the house to speak to one another. He referred to this as the sin of murmuring and would eavesdrop on the members to convince them that he could read their minds. One of the Lundgren's son warned the neighbors that on May 15, 1988, demons would emerge from the ground, leading the police to head out of the residence on April 23, 1988, on suspicion of a cult living in the house. 5 days later, a former member put in a tip to Chief Dennis T. Yarborough about the cult's plan to take over Kirtland Temple. While he didn't believe the claim, he did confront Jeffrey and tell them that there were complaints of gunfire coming from his residence. Later that day, Lundgren called off the takeover. On October 10, 1988, Jeffrey was officially excommunicated from the Church of RLDS. On this same day, a heavy thunderstorm came over the town, and once it had cleared, a rainbow was left behind. Jeffrey told his followers that this represented the opening of the 7 seals. It was around this time Jeffrey began giving Bible study courses in his home, asking for money from his supporters, and claiming that he was the last prophet. Many gave what they could, some even handing over thousands in their life savings.
Stupid
As
people,
time ticked
man.
on, Jeffrey claimed that the group would go through with the seizing of the temple. He had plans of getting them to vandalize, loot, and deface the temple until he came to a better idea. He began telling his followers that if they wanted to see God when he finally came back, they had to murder a family of 5. Lundgren said the Avery family had been disloyal to the group, and so...
Okay, now first of all, who would believe some stuff like that if you was told that by somebody in your church or whatever, that you have to murder these people? I don't get it. I don't understand why somebody would follow someone like that. Right there, I'd be gone. I would have been gone before that, but that would really get me out of there.
They would have to be sacrificed. On April 10th, 1989, Jeffrey told 2 of his followers to dig a hole fit for 5 bodies in the barn. The rest of his followers, which included the Averys, were told they were going on a trip into the wilderness. A week later, Lundgren rented a motel for all of his followers and ate a meal with them. Not long after this, he called the men of the group into a separate room to question them about their intent in going through with the sacrifice. According to reports, they all told him they were ready to go through with it for him. They decided that this is what needed to be done. That night, Jeffrey and Ron Luff, one of the members of the church, led Dennis Avery into the barn. After failing to stun gun him, he was knocked unconscious and shot twice in the back by Jeffrey. Dennis's wife was brought in next under the guise that her husband needed her help. Once inside the barn, she was bound, gagged, and shot 3 times in the breast and abdomen. Trina, who was only 15 years old, was shot twice in the head, followed by 13-year-old Becky and 6-year-old Karen. All the bodies were left in the hole dug earlier that day. The next day, a few officers came to the house to speak to Jeffrey, and while they didn't speak about the murders, Lundgren became incredibly nervous. Because of this, his family and a small amount of the followers moved to West Virginia. Months passed with no one confronting Jeffrey about the bodies, and so he moved once again. This time, he fled to California and left all the remaining members in West Virginia. 9 months following the killings on January 3, 1990, a tip from a police informant told them that they needed to look over the farm Jeffrey used to stay at. Once there, they uncovered the bodies, and the search for Jeffrey was on.
is some confusion over the exact number of bodies that have been found in a common grave in the basement of this barn along Route 6. Police, firemen, and federal alcohol, tobacco, and firearms agents spent the entire day sifting through the grave. The body of a man was found last night, 2 or 3 others this afternoon, and the search goes on at this hour.
With the help of former members, Jeffrey was located and charged with the crimes. Along with him, his wife and 11 other members were arrested in connection with the crime. Jeffrey was given life in prison, and 3 others involved were given anywhere from 50 to 170 years in prison. Only 5 members were given a sentence of about 20 years and were released in late 2010 and early 2011. On October 24, 2006, Jeffrey Lundgren was executed at Southern Ohio Correctional Facility. His last words were, "From my last words, I like to profess my love for God, my family, my children, and my beloved wife. I am because you are."
Man, I had never heard of that guy. Have any of you guys heard of him? I never knew nothing about that one. That was pretty interesting. I'm glad he's dead.
As a quick word of warning, the next installment in this list will include violence against children.
This guy, I have heard of
Jeffs
Jeffs.
was born on December 3rd, 1955 in Sacramento, California, to Rulon Jeffs and Marilyn Steed. His father was a leader of the FLDS Church until he passed away. He left behind over 19 wives and 80 children, given that he practiced polygamy, something that was taken out of the Mormons' tradition back in the 1980s. Despite this, the history of polygamy in Jeff's father's church go back many generations, with Jeff's grandfather having at least 50 wives and allegedly 80 or so children. Before Jeff's father passed away, Warren was just in the position of counselor to the church leader. After Rudolph passed away, Jeffs, who was seen as the golden child after surviving a premature birth, was given the title of President and Prophet, Seer and Revelator, along with President of the Priesthood. Over the course of 1 week, Jeffs had married nearly all of his father's wives, and those who refused were prohibited from marrying again. Jeffs was the head of the church, and so he had the most power. He used this against individuals who spoke out against him, and he would reassign wives and children to different fathers and homes at will. Since Jeffs had control of the church, its inhabitants, and the land it occupied, he soon built new communities elsewhere, including West Texas. In 2002, he established the Yearning for Zion Ranch and quickly showed off his power. He would control what everyone wore, who they could marry, the toys the children played with, and even refused to give them television or internet.
Yeah, because no television or internet, because then they could see that how full of shit he was and be swayed and maybe leave.
While they were inside, they had no connection to the outside world. In 2004, he excommunicated 21 men on what is being called disobedience. Not long after this, however, the 21 men pulled together and filed a civil suit against him in that same year. A nephew of Jeffs, Brent, also brought a lawsuit against him, claiming that Jeffs had sexually assaulted him. Soon after this, Jeffs dropped from the face of the earth. In 2005, Jeffs was indicted on a charge of sexual conduct with a minor, as well as conspiracy to commit sexual conduct with a minor by authorities in Arizona. A year later, he was also facing 2 counts of rape as an accomplice in 2006 from Utah authorities, when he arranged the marriage between a 14-year-old girl and her cousin, who was 19 years old. During this entire time, Jeffs was nowhere to be found, but as the charges stacked against him, the FBI placed him on their most wanted
right
list.
next to Osama bin Laden.
Police and FBI had a gut feeling that he was hiding out in one of the many compounds he'd built for the FLDS, and it was just a matter of finding him. Sometime in August of 2006, Jeffs was captured, hiding out in northern Las Vegas. On his persons, the authority found multiple wigs, sunglasses, and over $50,000 in cash. The next year, Jeffs was taken back to Utah to face charges of being an accessory to rape. While that was overturned, a 2008 raid of the YFZ Ranch in Texas held more than enough evidence to convict him. He went back on trial in 2011 for 2 of his marriages, one with a 12-year-old girl and another with a 15-year-old girl, which in Texas is of course illegal. Among the evidence found in the raid were journals and audio tapes recorded by Jeffs himself. He also had many of his wives write down his daily activities. Amongst the tapes were multiple recordings of assaults committed by Jeffs himself on girls as young as 12 years old. In a journal entry he wrote, "If the world knew what I was doing, they would hang me from the highest tree." On top of these 2 damning pieces of evidence, there were records of all of his marriages, which totaled over 70, with over a third being with underage girls. He also acted as his own attorney. Courts say that he would ramble on about nothing, read from the Book of Mormon, and even stood silently in front of the jury for 30 minutes as his closing statement. After all the theatrics he put on during the trial, he was finally sentenced on both accounts of sexual assaults and given life in prison. He continues to act out, however, according to reports. He's been on multiple hunger strikes and attempted suicide, but still resides in Powledge Prison and is currently 62 years old.
Count 2, that the defendant is guilty beyond a reasonable doubt of the crime charged in count 2 of the information read as accomplice. Dated this 25th day of September 2007 by the foreperson, Darrell
Finch.
Finch.
Thank you, Mr. Jeffs. You may be seated.
Okay, I remember seeing a clip not too long ago, though. They said he still acts out and everything, but I saw a clip of him where he was actually crying and everything and admitted that what he did was wrong and everything. So now he realizes that he's pretty much screwed and everything, and so he's coming clean, but he shouldn't even be alive. They executed that other guy. I mean, this guy was raping 12-year-old girls and sexually abusing boys too, so pretty bad.
Shoko's birth name was Kizuo Matsumoto.
I have seen this guy.
But we will get into why he changed it sometime later in the video. He was born on March 2nd, 1955, in Yatsushiro, Japan, to a family of 7 children. His family weren't very well off and made a living making and selling tatami mats to use as flooring in Japanese homes. Early in life, Shoko developed infantile glaucoma, which left him completely blind in one eye and partially blind in another. I was wondering, he
looked like he couldn't see.
He attended a school for the blind and went on to graduate in 1977, but never enrolled in university after that. Instead, he began studying Chinese medicine and married a woman named Tomoko Matsumoto. He sold herbal medicine for 3 years until in 1981 he was convicted of practicing pharmacy without a proper license. Once that fell through, he began studying Taoism and Chinese astrology. 6 years later, Shoko would undergo what he referred to as a spiritual awakening. It was at this time he founded Aum Shinrikyo, which roughly translates to Religion of Truth. The religion is a combination of many other religions, including Hindu and Buddhism, with influences from the Bible's revelations and the writings from Christian monk Nostradamus. The core belief was that the world was soon to come to an end, and Shoko was the only one who would lead those who were worthy to salvation. By the 1990s, Aum Shinrikyo totaled around 10,000 members, and Shoko attempted to put members in office, but they would all lose elections that they were a part of. Not long after this,
I noticed a really common
their
thing
own political
in a lot of these people. They're always the ones that are going to lead us away, you know, and
weapons
help us become better.
It was in 1995 that the group would become infamous across those in Japan, when 7 members of the Aum Shinrikyo attacked the Tokyo subway with sarin gas. This gas has become commonplace in terrorist-like attacks,
I remember this.
given that in its pure form, it's colorless, tasteless, and odorless. When dispersed in a vapor form, it is incredibly dangerous, as it's nearly impossible to tell if you've been affected before it's too late. According to the CDC, extreme symptoms of sarin gas include respiratory failure, convulsions, or seizures, all of which can lead to death. On the attack executed by the Aum Shinrikyo, 13 individuals were killed and over 1,000 were injured severely. After the investigation, Shoko's trial began the next year. It was a lengthy trial that took over 8 years for several reasons. Many of the members began denouncing what took place and distanced themselves from Shoko and his teachings. Shoko also refused to take the insanity defense when offered by his attorney. Finally, a defense attorney was accused of obstruction of justice, but later acquitted. Eventually, though, Shoko was convicted of 13 different crimes in 2004 and sentenced to death. He did appeal in 2006, but was declined. On June 6, 2018, Shoko and a handful of others who played a part in the attack in 1995 were executed by hanging. In 2002, the Aum Shinrikyo organization renamed themselves to Aleph and tried to distance themselves from the attack that took place in 1995. The group still follows and teaches everything Shoko originally did.
Back in 1995, a doomsday cult in Japan carried out a simultaneous attack using sarin gas on Tokyo's subway system, killing 13. Today, the man who founded the group and masterminded the horrific act is executed along with several of his zealots.
Well, that was 3 religious leaders charged with horrific crimes from the channel Mr. Davis. I'm sure there have been a lot more than that. Well, I know there have been a lot more than that. I mean, there was tons of them. That David Koresh was one of the most popular ones. There's a lot of them. But anyways, on a happier note, how about the joke of the day?
I woke up this morning and everything in my apartment had been stolen and replaced with an exact replica. I called up my roommate and said, "I can't believe this. Can you look at this? Everything has been stolen and replaced with an exact replica." He looked at me and said, "Do I know you?"
Thank you, everybody, and thanks for watching. Like, comment, subscribe, hashtag Mean Gene, all that fun stuff. And I will see you next time.